Out at the edge of the town, where the fields go soft and the ground gets a little bit squelchy underfoot, there is a place where the water doesn't rush anywhere at all. It just stays. It settles in between the grasses and the reeds and the low, round-topped rushes, and it holds very still, like someone who has found a comfortable spot and decided there is absolutely no reason to move. This kind of place is called a wetland, and wetlands are some of the quietest, most lovely, most surprising places in the whole wide world. You might not think so at first. If you walked up to the edge of one on a slow gray morning, you might look out across all that pale water and those tall swaying reeds and think, well, nothing much is happening here. But you would be wonderfully wrong. Because wetlands are absolutely full of life. Teeming with it, buzzing and fluttering and wading and diving with it. You just have to be patient and quiet and let your eyes go soft and easy, and then slowly, one by one, the wetland begins to show you all its secrets. Let's go there together now, slowly. There's no rush at all. The first thing you would notice, if you were standing at the edge of a wetland on a calm day, is the water itself. Not rushing, not tumbling, not hurrying anywhere, just lying there, flat and still and silver gray or silver blue depending on the sky. And if you looked carefully at that water, you would see something rather magical. You would see the sky again, reflected back up at you from below, all the clouds drifting slowly across, the pale wash of blue between them. Perhaps a tree at the edge, its branches reaching down into the water as well as up into the air, so that it seems to be growing in two directions at once. The world doubled. The sky above and the sky below, and the thin line of the water's surface sitting quietly in between. This is one of the things about wetlands that people who love them talk about most. The stillness, the doubling, the sense that you are standing at the edge of something very peaceful, where time has slowed right down and the whole world is just resting. And it's in this in-between place, not quite water, not quite land, wet ground and shallow pools and tall stands of reeds, that some of the most wonderful birds in the world have made their homes. The gray heron arrives first in the morning, usually. Or perhaps he was there all along, and you simply didn't notice him. That is one of the great talents of the gray heron, standing very, very still. Honestly, it is something to behold. He stands there at the edge of the shallow water on his long, pale legs, and he doesn't move, not a feather, not a toe. He just stands, and the water stands, and the reeds stand, and everything is perfectly still together. The gray heron is a very large bird. If you saw one standing next to a person, you would be surprised. They come right up past the knees. Their wings, when they spread them, are enormous and softly gray like the underside of a rain cloud. They have long necks that they fold into a sort of S shape when they're resting, tucking their chin in, looking thoughtful. And they have very long, sharp beaks, which they use to catch fish. Can you imagine what it is like to be a fish, going about your ordinary fish business in the shallow water? And then, very fast, faster than you could ever see, a beak the length of your arm comes plunging down from above. The heron catches fish with one quick, quiet strike. Then he tips his head back, and the fish disappears. He doesn't make much fuss about it, catches his breakfast, tips it back, then resumes standing very still again, looking as though he was never doing anything at all. Isn't that funny? All that patience, and then one quick movement, and then back to the stillness as if nothing happened. The gray heron is one of those birds that seems very old and very wise, even though birds don't really think in quite the way we do. But there is something about the way he stands at the water's edge, perfectly still, that feels ancient. Like he has been standing at the edge of still water for a very, very long time. Long before any of us were here to watch him. The reeds are swaying a little now, even though the wind is barely there at all. Just the faintest breath of air moving through them, making a sound like someone sighing contentedly. Shh, say the reeds. Shh. Reeds are remarkable plants. They grow very tall, sometimes taller than a grown-up, and they have these long, straight stems and feathery brown heads at the top that nod in the breeze. They grow in thick, crowded stands at the edges of wetlands, and they make a kind of reed city, a whole maze of tall green corridors, where the water runs in shallow channels and the ground underneath is soft, dark mud. And in that reed city, hidden away in the stems, a tiny bird called a reed warbler is doing something extraordinary. It is singing. You would have to go slowly and stand very quietly to hear it, and it would take a moment to place the sound, because it seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, bouncing around inside the reeds. The song of the reed warbler is a wonderful jumble. Chattering and chirring and bubbling, full of little phrases repeated and then changed, as if the bird is making up a story and then going back to change a word here and there. It is one of the most cheerful, most endlessly inventive sounds in any wetland, and it comes from a bird you might never actually see, hidden there in the reeds. The reed warbler is small and brown and not especially remarkable to look at. Pale underneath, warm brown on top. But that song, filling the air with all its little looping, repeating phrases, going on, as if the bird has something very important to say and has simply been waiting for you to stand still long enough to hear it. Out on the open water, further from the reeds, there are ducks. Ducks are very comfortable birds. There is something wonderfully round and satisfied, looking about a duck floating on still water. They bob gently with any tiny movement of the water's surface, tipping a little this way, a little that way, entirely unbothered. They don't appear to be going anywhere in particular. They are simply floating, which seems to suit them very well. The mallard is the duck most people know. The one with the shiny green head, like a jewel, and the orange feet, and the quiet brown wife swimming alongside him. Because, yes, the male mallard and the female mallard look quite different from each other, which takes some people by surprise. The male is very handsome and rather knows it, with that gleaming green head that changes color as he turns, going from green to purple, green to bright emerald, depending on how the light catches it. The female is brown and spotted, which might seem less exciting, but is actually very sensible, because when she is sitting on a nest, all that brown blends perfectly into the reeds and the mud and the old leaves. Can you imagine a nest down in the reeds, right at the water's edge, with 12 eggs tucked together inside it, and the mother sitting quietly on top of them, perfectly camouflaged, the whole nest invisible to anyone who doesn't know exactly where to look? The ducklings, when they hatch, are tiny and yellow and impossibly soft-looking, and they take to the water almost immediately. They swim in a little line behind their mother, and she steers them gently, keeping them close, turning this way and that across the open water. The ducklings bob along behind her, following the same turns, and the whole procession moves slowly across the still surface of the wetland with perfect seriousness. Now let your eyes travel a little further across the water to where the light is just touching the far bank. There, standing in the shallows, is a bird you might not have seen before. She is white, very white, almost glowing. And she has long, thin legs and a long, thin neck and an elegant, pointed yellow beak. She stands very still, the way the heron stands, watching the water. She is called a little egret, and she is one of the most beautiful birds you will ever see in a wetland. The little egret looks delicate, but she is not. She walks slowly through shallow water, placing each foot carefully, her neck curled in that S shape, watching. And then she strikes, quick as a blink, and comes up with a tiny fish, or a little frog, or a water insect. And then she is still again, white and brilliant at the water's edge. A 100 years ago, if you had lived in Britain and tried to spot a little egret, you would have been out of luck. They simply didn't live here. But the world slowly changed. The winters grew a little milder. The little egrets began to creep north through France and across the Channel. And now they are here, standing in the shallows of British wetlands, white and still and lovely. They found the wetlands and decided to stay. Can you blame them? Somewhere deep in the reeds, something booms. It is a low, hollow sound, almost like someone blowing across the top of an enormous bottle. It rolls out across the wetland, low and slow and slightly mysterious. This is the bittern. The bittern is one of the most secretive birds in any wetland, and also one of the strangest. It is a large bird about the size of a small heron, and it is colored in streaks of brown and cream and black, exactly the color of dried reeds in winter with their pale stems and their dark shadows. When a bittern stands still in the reeds, it is invisible. Completely, absolutely, extraordinarily invisible. And when it knows someone is watching, or thinks they might be, it does something almost comical. It stretches its neck straight up, points its beak at the sky, and freezes. Now it looks exactly like a reed. Just another tall, streaky stem among all the other tall, streaky stems. Standing there with its beak in the air, absolutely still, looking to all the world like part of the scenery. Isn't that wonderful? An entire large bird pretending to be a plant. The bittern is so good at this that for many years in Britain there were almost none left, because the old wetlands were drained for farmland and the reeds were cut back, and the bitterns had nowhere to hide. But people have been making wetlands again, restoring them, flooding old fields, letting the reeds grow tall and tangled, and the bitterns have been coming back, one by one. Now, on a quiet morning, if you walk very slowly along a reed bed path and stand very still and wait, you might hear that boom rolling out across the water. That low, round, almost magical sound, the bittern hidden in the reeds, calling out to other bitterns somewhere far away. The light is changing now. The morning has shifted into something softer, and the water has gone from silver to a pale, warm gold. The reflections are sharper. You can see individual clouds in the still surface, white and rounded, drifting from one side of the water to the other. This is the best time to watch for kingfishers. If you have never seen a kingfisher, I want you to try to imagine the most brilliant, most electric, most impossibly vivid blue you have ever seen in your life. A blue so bright it almost hurts to look at, the way it catches the light. And then, underneath, a warm, deep orange red, like the inside of a tangerine. That is a kingfisher. And when it flies, low and straight and fast over the surface of the water, It leaves a streak of color across the air, gone in a second, like a tiny firework that has already passed. The kingfisher sits on a branch above the water, a low branch, close to the surface, and it watches. Its head tilts very slightly, looking down at the water, adjusting its position to account for the way water bends the light. Because light bends when it passes through water, which means that a fish seen from above looks to be in a slightly different place than it actually is, and the kingfisher knows this and makes the adjustment and then dives. A perfect, tiny, brilliant arrow of color plunging through the surface and comes back up with a fish. Can you imagine being that fish? Going about your peaceful fish day in the dark water, and then suddenly a small comet of orange and blue falls out of the sky. The kingfisher takes the fish back to its branch and holds it sideways in its beak for a moment before swallowing it. They always hold the fish head first to swallow it, so the fins don't catch. Even tiny birds know things like this. The wetland in summer is a place of great drowsy warmth. By midday, the light is thick and golden, and the sounds of the wetland have settled into a comfortable hum. Insects, dragonflies mostly, skimming over the water with their wings catching the light like little pieces of stained glass. And damselflies too, smaller and more delicate, resting on the tips of reeds with their wings folded back. Blue ones and red ones, and ones that are a deep, dark jewel. Green. The water reflects all of it. The dragonflies, the reeds, the slow fat clouds above. Out on the open water, a coot bobs along. The coot is a bird that looks as though it got dressed in a hurry and forgot to match. Black body, white beak, and a little white shield above the beak on its forehead. This white shield is where we get the old saying, as bald as a coot. Though the coot isn't really bald, it's just that white patch that gives that impression. Coots are wonderfully argumentative birds. They seem to spend a great deal of their time taking offense at other coots who have come a little too close to their patch of water, puffing up and chasing each other in short, splashing runs across the surface. They make a sharp, abrupt call. K-whack. That sounds like an exclamation of mild annoyance, which is more or less what it is. But then the chase is over, and the coot bobs back to the middle of its chosen patch of water and resumes looking round at the world with its beady red eye, satisfied. Crisis resolved. The moorhen is the coot's neighbor and cousin, and very different in character. Where the coot is loud and bossy, the moorhen is shy and a little nervy, picking its way along the water's edge or through the shallows with dainty, high-stepping feet. Enormous feet, much too big for its body. Nodding its head as it goes, as if agreeing with something someone has said. The moorhen is dark, like the coot, but has a red beak tipped with yellow rather than a white one, and no white forehead shield. Where the coot swims boldly out into open water, the moorhen prefers the shadows and the edges, slipping in and out of the reeds, bobbing its tail as it goes. A quiet, careful, gentle bird. As the afternoon settles in, something changes in the air over the wetland. The light begins to shift, from gold to amber, from amber to the first pale hints of rose. The shadows of the reeds stretch out long and soft across the water. And the wetland birds begin to move about a little more, as if remembering that evening is coming and there are still things to do. A family of swans glides into view from somewhere further down the water. The parents are white and enormous and very regal. Swans always look as though they are deeply confident that they are the most important birds present. And to be fair, when a swan is swimming towards you across still water, head held high, it is difficult to disagree with them. The cygnets, the baby swans, are gray, brown, and fluffy, paddling hard to keep up with the smooth, effortless glide of their parents. They have not yet developed the wonderful, elegant, neck-tucking posture of the adult swan. They are still a bit gangly and uncertain looking. Their feathers still soft and brownish, swimming along with great determination. The mute swan is called mute because it doesn't make the honking or whooping calls of some other swan species. But it isn't entirely silent. It hisses when it's annoyed, a soft but very definite sound that means, "Please do not come any closer. Thank you." And it makes a low, soft call to its cygnets, a gentle rumbling sound, very different from what you might expect from such a large bird. Tender, almost. And the sound of a swan in flight, which you can hear from far away if one passes overhead, is one of the most distinctive sounds in the world. Its wings make a deep, rhythmic, singing hum, the air thrumming through the feathers. A swan flying over a wetland at dusk, wings singing, crossing in front of the pale sky. There are few things more beautiful. Now the light is going soft and rosy, and the wetland is settling into its evening. The little egret has found her roosting spot in a tree at the water's edge and is standing very still among the branches, white against the darkening leaves. The gray heron has moved a little further along the bank and is still fishing. Herons fish late, patient as ever, unmoved by the shifting of the light. And somewhere, far off across the reed beds, there is a sound that is one of the definitive sounds of an evening wetland. A sound that rises and falls, carries across the water, and seems to come from the very heart of the reeds themselves. It is a reed bunting, perhaps, or a sedge warbler. Small brown birds, both of them, tucked deep into their reed homes, singing the day down. The sedge warbler especially is a magnificent singer. not as hidden as the reed warbler, sometimes sitting right out on top of a reed, throwing its song into the air with what seems like tremendous enthusiasm. It includes all sorts of sounds in its song, its own phrases, but also bits of other birds' songs mixed in, chirps and buzzes and trills borrowed and woven together. Isn't that marvelous? A bird that listens to the world around it and sings bits of it back. Here is something to think about as the wetland grows quiet. Water birds have feet that help them. It sounds obvious when you say it, but if you really look at a water bird's feet, they are extraordinary. The webbed feet of a duck. Those broad orange paddles are perfectly shaped for pushing through water like two small oars. The long toes of a moorhen spread its weight across the surface of floating lily pads so it can walk on them without sinking. The enormous feet of a heron let it wade through deep water without tipping over. Each bird's feet are shaped exactly right for the water world it lives in. And water birds' feathers? Those too are made for the wet. Ducks and geese have special oil glands near their tails, and they spend time spreading this oil through their feathers with their beaks, which is called preening, and which makes the feathers waterproof. If you've ever watched water bead up on a duck's back, rolling off in perfect round drops, the feathers completely dry underneath, that is the oil at work. A duck sitting in rain or diving through water keeps its skin perfectly dry beneath those waterproofed feathers. Can you imagine having a coat that shed rain like that? Never getting wet, no matter how long you were in the water, just climbing out, shaking once or twice, and being completely dry. The sky over the wetland now is that deep, tender blue that comes just before the stars. The water holds it faithfully, that darkening blue reflected up from below, and the reeds are just shapes now, darker shadows against the sky. The last light catches the tips of them, a faint gold, and then even that fades. In a few moments, the wetland will be very quiet. But not completely quiet. Because one more bird comes to the wetland at dusk, and you should know about it before you sleep. The heron. Still there, always there. Folds his wings and lifts his heavy body from the bank with a slow, steady beat and flies off to his roosting tree. His wings are so large and his body so big that he seems to move through the air slowly, though he is not slow. He gives a single croaking call as he goes, a raw, grating honk that sounds entirely wrong for such a large and dignified bird, and which always seems to surprise people the first time they hear it. Franck. Just once. And then he is gone into the dark, and now it is the world of the night birds. The teal, small, compact ducks, not as big as a mallard, with that lovely chestnut and green head on the male. teal begin moving at dusk. They fly in small, tight flocks, twisting and turning through the air with a speed and agility that seems impossible for a duck. They whistle as they go, a soft, bell-like call. Teal, teal. And they are one of the reasons that people who love wetlands love the autumn most of all, when the teal come in from the north in their hundreds, filling the water and the evening air. And on the mud at the water's edge, that dark, soft, important mud, the snipe are doing something no one would ever see if they weren't looking very carefully. Snipe are extraordinary birds. Long, straight beaks, much longer than their heads, with flexible tips that can feel for worms and insects down in the mud. They probe the mud with these beaks, pushing them in and drawing them out, working steadily along the water's edge. They are wonderfully camouflaged. Striped brown and cream, exactly the color of dead leaves and dried mud. And they move quietly, deliberately, unhurried. The snipe's beak is so sensitive at the tip that it can feel the tiny movements of a worm several centimeters down in soft mud. Imagine having fingertips sensitive enough to feel a worm moving underground. That is what the snipe's beak can do, which is why it is so long and why the snipe spends so much of its life pushing it into the earth. Everything is very quiet now. The water is black and perfectly still, and the stars have come out, and the reflections of the stars are in the water too, doubled, the way everything is doubled in a wetland. Star above and star below, lying on the surface of the still water like tiny scattered lights. The reeds are only a dark outline now, against the sky. There is the faintest, softest rustling from them. The night breeze, barely there, moving through. Shh, say the reeds again. Shh. That low, booming sound, rolling out across the dark water, traveling a long way in the still night air. No one answers. But the bittern calls once more, quieter this time, and then is silent. You know, the thing about wetlands is that they are one of those places that are much more important than they look. If you just glanced at one, you might think, it's just a soggy patch of ground with some water in it and some tall reeds. But wetlands are incredibly important for the whole world around them. They slow down floodwater, the way a sponge slows down water poured onto it. When it rains and the rivers run high, the wetland soaks up the extra water and holds it slowly. This means the villages downstream stay dry. They clean the water too. The plants and the mud and the tiny living things in a wetland filter the water as it passes through, taking out many of the things that shouldn't be in it, leaving it cleaner as it goes on its way. They store enormous amounts of carbon, all those reeds and all that deep, dark, peaty mud locking away carbon that would otherwise be in the air, old wetlands that have been growing for thousands of years have layers and layers of compressed reed and sedge down in their mud, each layer a different year, going down and down like a book of the weather. And they are home to so much life. Not just the birds, though the birds are perhaps the most visible and the most wonderful part of it, but fish in the water, frogs in the shallows, water voles tunneling in the banks, otters sliding in at dusk. Dragonflies hatching from the water after spending years as larvae in the mud at the bottom. Every small, still pool with its own community of tiny things. Water boatmen sculling across the surface, pond skaters walking on it, great diving beetles sweeping through below. All of it. The whole extraordinary, busy, quiet world of the wetland, turning on the stillness of the water, on the patience of the mud. The gray heron is in his roosting tree now. He stands on a branch, hunched slightly, his neck folded in, one long leg drawn up against his body. His eyes are half closed. The wind, if there is any, moves through his feathers gently. He is, in his own way, asleep. The ducks are asleep on the water, heads tucked back, beaks resting in the feathers between their wings. They drift very slowly, not going anywhere, just drifting on the still surface, completely at rest. The reed warblers are tucked into the reeds. The very reeds they sing in all day. Each one holding tight to a stem, small feet curled around it, feathers fluffed up against the night air. The little egret is motionless in her tree. The snipe have moved away from the water's edge and are resting somewhere in the long, wet grass, invisible, still. Even the reeds have stopped their gentle shh-ing. Everything is still. The water holds the stars, and the stars hold the sky, and between them, the thin line of the water's surface is a mirror of everything. The dark shapes of the trees, the pale, far horizon, the soft and spreading dark. There is something comforting about a wetland at night. The same wetland that was full of movement and color and sound in the morning. The kingfishers' streak of blue, the herons' patient vigil, the ducklings in their line, the booming bittern, is now simply quiet, simply resting. All that life at rest. The reeds will be there in the morning, and the water will be there, and the still silver sky reflected in it. The heron will fly down to the water's edge before the light has properly come, because herons are always early. The ducks will wake and shake and begin their peaceful dabbling in the shallows. The reed warbler will start its cheerful, looping, inventive song hidden in the reeds. The whole wetland will start again, gently, just as it always does. That is the thing about wetlands. They are patient places. They have been there a long time. Some of them for thousands of years, since the glaciers melted and the water found low places in the land to settle in. The same shallow pools and the same deep, peaty mud, and generation after generation of herons standing at the water's edge, doing what herons have always done. Standing still. Watching. Waiting. Patient as the water itself. The stars are very bright now, and the water holds them faithfully. Somewhere out there in the dark, the bittern is standing in the reeds, though you can't see him because he has been invisible his whole life and is very good at it. His long striped neck is pulled in, his beak perhaps just slightly upward, a shape among shapes in the dark reed bed. And the water is perfectly still, and the stars are reflected in it, and somewhere very far above the wetland, too high and too quiet to hear, only visible in the very faintest shadow against the dark sky. Birds are flying. They fly at night, many of them, navigating by the stars, crossing from one country to another, following routes they were born knowing. Tiny birds mostly. Warblers and thrushes, making their long journeys north or south depending on the season. Some of them will come down at dawn, exhausted, and they will find a wetland, this wetland, or another one somewhere along the way. And they will rest in the reeds and drink from the still water and sleep a little. And then they will go on. The wetland is a resting place for travelers, as well as a home for those who stay. It is very late now and very quiet, and you are warm and still. The water is still. The reeds are still. The heron in his tree is still. The ducks on the water are drifting very slowly, not going anywhere at all, just resting. And somewhere in the reed bed, the bittern is standing with his beak pointing up, as he has done all his life, and as all the bitterns before him have done, patient and hidden and still, listening to the quiet. The reflected stars in the still water look just like the real stars above. There is no difference, really. Everything is the same both ways. The whole world, doubled, above and below. Quiet above, quiet below. The reeds sway once, very softly. Shh. And the water settles, and everything is still.